With me? Jesus, we are thankful for each and every person in this room, for each and every story that is represented in this room. We're thankful that we get to come and we get to worship and we get to talk about you, God, this morning. And all God's people said, amen. All right. Come right over here. One step, perfect. 2 steps right there, perfect. Give me 1 sec. I want to introduce you guys to a very good friend of mine. This is Doug. Can you guys say hi, Doug? Hi, Doug. Doug is become a really good friend. If you ever meet somebody for the first time and you just instantly connect, and that was Doug for me. We started Pavilions Campus 2 years ago almost, and Doug had come walking up to our church, and for the last year has been incredibly a part of our church. And one of the things that we used to do at Pavilions Campus was we would share stories, because stories are important. And I've asked Doug this morning to share his story with you all. So there's your microphone, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Is this on? No?
There you go.
Okay,
yeah.
Good morning. As I was thinking about this morning and trying to organize my thoughts about what I wanted to say to you all, it occurred to me that during our lives, all of us have major things that happen to us. Sometimes we perceive them as good, sometimes we perceive them as not so good. But our lives can be traced, followed by some of the major events in our lives. In my nearly 80 years of living, I've had a lot of major events take place. You will be happy to know that I'm not going to share all of them with you this morning. They were way too happy about that. What I would like to do is to back up from here about 10 years. Because it was 10 years ago that doctors told me I was going to lose my sight. I was a building contractor here in Sacramento, had a fairly good business. That was one thing that I did. That was one part of my life. I'm a runner. That's one of the reasons Brennan and I connected. Have been a runner for over 60 years. In fact, if I were to tell you how many miles I've run in my life, you wouldn't believe me. So I won't tell you. And I am a self-proclaimed musician. Not so many other people agree with that, but it's something I do. I play the guitar, I sing, I enjoy it. I do it mostly for myself. And if I can wrangle someone else to listen, I'll do it. When I was told I was going to lose my sight, it pretty well knocked me down. And as I thought about this morning and how I wanted to break this down for you, I thought about the 4 areas, the 4 facets of our lives that are talked about in one of the Gospels when it was said about Jesus that he grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And losing my sight pretty much affected all 4 facets of my life. It affected my spiritual life, and that's a hard thing to admit. It wasn't that I stopped having faith in God or didn't believe in him anymore. But I will say that I seriously questioned his judgment. And I did that by asking why. why did this happen to me? Why did this have to happen to me? Why did you allow this to happen to me? And why can't we do something about it? The doctors had told me they couldn't fix it, but I knew that God could if he wanted to. And I have been prayed for by a lot of people. But I'm still blind. And it's okay. But as I went through this spiritual struggle, what I discovered was that why was not a useful question to ask God. And I didn't get an answer. And I asked him a lot of times. I went on a lot of walks, I'll tell you. And I asked God why this was happening. And I told him in no uncertain terms I thought it was unfair. And I didn't get an answer. When I finally started asking what was for me the right question and the useful question, God began to speak to my heart. And that question was, what? What do you want to teach me? What do you want me to do? What can I do to be of service to you, God? And as that spiritual journey, and believe me, I was 67 years old when I started this. You'd think I would know better. You'd think I would have kind of been grown up spiritually by then, wouldn't you? I'm sure all of you are. But I have found that every day of my life is a new day. And I have found that even more since I have lost my sight, that I learn something new every day. In fact, God finally gave me the why, Brennan. He finally gave me the why of losing my sight. But it affected me spiritually. It also affected me physically because, as I said, I'm a runner. Have been for a long time. Ran in track in high school and college and did all that stuff. I've run 8 marathons. It's something that I do. It's part of me. And I thought after I lost my sight, I can't do this anymore. Obviously, blind people don't run. So I stopped. As I went through the spiritual journey, I also went through a retreat with Society for the Blind here in Sacramento, where they gave me tools and taught me how to be blind, because I didn't know how to be blind. I was clueless. I decided that maybe I could run, so I started again. And since I have started running, I've run the Los Angeles Marathon. I've run the San Diego Half Marathon, several 10Ks. And if everything hangs together, Brennan, and goes well, I'll run the half marathon this year in the California International Marathon. I'm ever hopeful. It affected me also mentally. When you lose something, when you experience what I called then a catastrophic loss, it's the normal direction that we people go, we humans go, is to go into the grief process. And there are several steps in the grief process, and one of those is denial. You know, for blind people, it's I'm not that blind, so we keep on driving. And trust me when I tell you, you don't want to know how many blind people there are out there driving today. So as the process goes on and you go through the grief process, also anger is one of those steps of grief, one of the stages. I spent a lot of time in anger. I was mad at my body for betraying me. I was mad at God for allowing it to happen. I was pretty much mad at everybody. And I'm not proud to tell you that. It's just true. It's one of the normal stages of grief, as is depression and denial and bargaining. I was the poster child. If you look that up in the dictionary, my picture was right up there alongside it. But the end result, hopefully, and in good health, the end result for the grief process is acceptance. And I want to tell you, the day that that happened for me, that I accepted, I'm not visually impaired, I'm not low vision, I'm blind. And I had to accept that I am blind. And then I could start going forward from there, because that's what every person who experiences loss, that's what we need, is a way forward. So there's spiritually, mentally, physically. I talked to you about the running and the guitar playing. And then there is, what's the fourth one, Brennan? Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. All of those elements of our lives, socially, is the fourth one. I have to tell you this morning that that's one of the most difficult stages, facets of my life. It was, after having lost my sight. Because right now, I can't see you. I know there are people out there because sometimes you laugh at my silly jokes. And when you are blind, I can sense the presence of people out here. But it's hard to maintain relationships. It's difficult to establish new relationships. It's difficult to communicate with and be communicated with when you have a disability such as blindness. I have to tell you this, that when I walked in over to Faith Legacy at Pavilions at Sierra Oak School, the first person who I came in contact with was Dale. Do you know Dale? Yeah. He walked up to me and he said, "Hi, I'm Dale." And I said, "My name is Doug." And he said, "This is a Wesleyan church." I said, "Thank you, Jesus." And from that moment on, I have to tell you, from that moment on, I have felt at home. I felt like I have found a church home. When I walked into that gymnasium with those round tables and sat down, when we had our round table discussions, this is something that just blew me away, because people either get it or they don't get it around blind people. If you get it, you don't know it, but you just know how to act. If you don't get it, you don't know it, but you're just as apt to grab a blind person by their elbow and say, "Come with me," like that. That isn't a good thing to do. That's why we carry this cane, because whack, let go of me. But when we did our roundtable discussions, somebody always took the responsibility to read the questions so that Doug could hear and understand. Somebody always took it upon themselves to read the Bible verses so that I could hear them. If you don't know how much that meant to me, Brennan, you don't know how much that meant to me. To be included as a part of, because when Brennan told me that there were 6 or 7 of the wives who were pregnant in that little church, and I'm nearly 80 years old, I thought, I'm old enough to be some of these kids' great-grandfather. And yet they reached out to me in such a special way that I can't even explain it. So where does that leave me? Where do we go from there? Well, our lives are not static. At least I hope they're not static. Our lives are dynamic. Our lives are developing and doing something every single day. We have challenges, we have issues, we have triumphs, and we have some failures. But our lives are dynamic. And I want my life to go on. I want to be a person who reaches out to other people. I'm a mentor at Society for the Blind. I sit in on retreats. I go on outreach. I talk to people who are blind. I've had the opportunity to share my faith. I've met people I would have never met if I hadn't lost my sight. I've been on airplanes. I've flown to Sweden 5 times by myself. I fly all over the country because I can. And I want to close with this. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Idaho visiting family. And on the way back, my Southwest flight was full. I like Southwest because I get to pre-board. And I get to pick my own seat, 4 rows back on the starboard side. That's Doug's seat. If you get on a Southwest airplane, leave that one alone. It's mine. And I sat down in my seat, and because it was a full flight, I had someone sitting right next to me. And you know that airplanes today, if you've got someone next to you, they're next to you. And it happened to be a lady I estimated around 50 years old, I think because of the age of her kids. And we started talking. And we talked for the whole hour of that flight. I'm an aviation nut. I love airplanes. Anything that flies, I love it. She was a pilot. We talked about that. And somehow don't ask me how this happened, but we got on the subject of running. And she said, I need to start exercising. And so we talked about that. And she asked questions and I answered some of them. And I just encouraged her. It probably wasn't what you would call witnessing in the strictest sense of the word. But it's interesting that the Bible tells us that we're supposed to be ambassadors for Christ, as if he were making his appeal through us. That's what Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 5:20. And that has to start somewhere. You don't get to the end by starting at the end. You get to the end by starting at the beginning. And I was able to just share with that lady who was a little rough around the edges. And we talked for the whole hour. That was one of the fastest flights between Boise and Sacramento I've ever been on. When we landed in Sacramento, and this is why I told the story, she took a hold of my hand and she said, I am so glad I got to talk to you. You've inspired me. And I thought, I'm just plain old Doug. There's nothing special about me. But if you take an ordinary person and team that ordinary person up with God, you have something extraordinary that can happen. And there isn't any limit to what God can do. I stand before you as a testimony to that fact. I love life. I love God. And I want to tell you that I thank you and appreciate having the opportunity to stand before you this morning and share my story, at least part of it, with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Then one more. Awesome. Everyone has a story. And everybody's story is worth telling. And when we set out 2 years ago to launch a new campus as a church, the goal was to ignite people's stories, to hear people's stories, the hurts, the pains, the joys, all of it. Because our job wasn't to just cherry pick all the good stuff. We wanted to hear everything. And we wanted people to know that we weren't afraid to lean into those things, that we're going to be there in the good times, that we're going to be there in the bad times. And we started out with that idea, and it was just really a couple people in the beginning, and that started to grow, and it started to grow. And 2 years later, we had an incredible group of people who wanted to chase after Jesus, share our stories together, and love the community. And here we are today, back home. And none of those things have changed. And I just want to say that for each and every person who was a part of building Pavilion's campus, because it wasn't anything that I did or Jeff and Lori did or Sammy or whoever else. It was a group of people committed to hearing each other's stories and loving each other. And that's it. And that's what the church is supposed to be. The church is just supposed to be a group of people getting together, hanging out together, learning about one another, and learning about Jesus. And then that should inspire us to become better versions of ourselves. And sometimes we come into church and we don't actually participate. We just kind of sit and then check it off the list and we feel good about ourselves and then we go about our day. And I don't think that that's how Jesus set the church up. And I think he set it up in a way for us to come and to engage with one another. To engage in each other's stories and lives. To hear about how each other's week has been. To pray over one another because we believe that through prayer, miracles can and do happen. And somewhere along the way, we like to create systems and methods, and along the way, we think that nothing can ever change. It has to be this way because it worked really well one time. And I don't think that that's true. So here's what I actually want to do this morning for a couple minutes, because I want you to engage with people. Because in the same way that Doug walked into our church, it's easy to engage at Pavilion's campus because there's only 35 people in the room. So it wasn't like when you walk in that room, you're immediately immersed in community. Well, when you walk into this room, you're in community, but in a different sense. You can hide in here. There's enough people in here that you can hide. And the introverts are already terrified about what's going to happen next. Don't worry. It's going to be a controlled environment, I promise, okay? You can hide in here with this many people. You can come into church, you can check it off your list, and you can walk out and you can feel good about yourself. But that's not what church is meant to be. So here's what I want to do. Just for 2 minutes, I want you to grab 2 or 3 people around you. Don't physically grab them. And then I just want you to answer this one question. Who is it that inspires you and why? Who is it that inspires you and why? So for me, it could be Doug, who just shared his testimony. Over the last year, Doug has been an inspiration for me. Because that's a guy who doesn't make excuses anymore. That's a guy who's not allowing something large in his life to impact the rest of his life. He's been an inspiration to me. So maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your dad, maybe it's a grandparent. I don't know who it is for you. But I want you to turn to someone, not your spouse. If your spouse is here, that's cheating, all right? That will ruin the experiment. So turn to someone, and I want you to tell them, who is it that inspires you and why? Ready, set, go. You have 2 minutes.
was my very first boss. It was a woman, and her husband, they started a parts store, and a month after they got it going, he passed away with a heart attack.
What was his name? What was the name?
Frida Hope.
That's awesome.
She took the bulls by the horn, learned how to, all the parts of an engine, how to tear it down. I got out of high school. She took me under my wing.
Raised you up.
Taught me all about auto parts, and there for 37 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's incredible.
Keep that.
I love it. That's incredible.
Parts store was called Superior, and that was her motto, Mother Superior.
I love it. That's awesome.
I don't know what the assignment was.
It was to share with someone who inspired you.
Where's Jeff? Because you did too. Can I have your hands go?
You can.
Where's Jeff?
He's over there. All right. All right, all right. Come back to me. That's right. That's right. Come back to me now. I will turn the lights down on you if I have to. All right. All right. I love it. No, you're okay. I love it. I love it. Shh. All right, all right. We could do this all afternoon, couldn't we? There's not a big game or anything to get to. So I actually, I want to hear from a few people in the room. Who is it that inspires you? Go ahead, raise your hand. Who is it that inspires you? I want to hear from a couple people. Right here in the corner, yeah. Church. Okay, good. Who else? Who inspires you? Good. Who else? Right here.
My wife.
Amen.
My hubby.
Your hubby. Yeah, let's go.
My dad.
Your dad. Good.
Pastor Bob, my first pastor.
Oh, Pastor Bob. I love him. What'd you say? The Hattons.
Amen. My students.
Your students. Your mother. Yeah. Who else? Who else? Anyone else?
My Shirley.
Oh, Shirley Preby. Yeah, let's go. Anyone else? Right here.
My best friend Toby.
Toby. Yeah. Rachel Wiley. Yeah. Anyone else? Lori Jennings. Yeah, good. Right here. Right here. Little man. What's that? Daddy? Let's go. Let's go. Yeah. That's enough dad juice for the rest of the year. Anyone else?
My Uncle Jeff.
Yeah, Uncle Jeff. Yeah. Right here, little man. Your sister.
The man that I'm learning Hebrew from online.
Awesome. That's incredible. You see, this is what never happens, right? Like, you guys don't go to dinner parties and you answer the question, who inspires us, right? You come into church, your job is to engage. Your job isn't to just come here on a Sunday morning and sit in a chair and raise your hands and listen to someone teach and then leave here and then going about your lives. Like that, we're missing it if that's all that it is.
Amen.
And over the last 2 years, Pavilions was an absolute experiment. And I had no idea how it was going to go, to be frankly honest with you. I probably said a lot of the right things, and when you say the right things or the wrong things, when you say them with confidence, it just sounds good, and that's what I've learned to do. I just say anything with confidence, and it sounds good. But I had no idea what I was doing with Pavilions Campus most of the time. But I knew what I wanted it to look like, and I wanted it to look like the moment that just took place in this room, where people are leaning into each other's stories and leaning into their messes and their lives together. And so when I had shared with everybody at Pavilions Campus that we were coming back here to merge together as a church, I made a commitment. Let me get back up here so you guys can see me. I made a commitment to every single family. And I met with almost every single family at our church. And my commitment was, you will not get lost. You will not get lost. Because when you walked in before and there were 35 people, guess what? It was impossible to get lost. Because everybody knew when you were there and when you weren't there. Well, it's easy to get lost here. And my commitment to each and every family member and each and every person in our church was, you will not get lost in this room. I will not allow it. And so what I'm asking for all of you is, don't make me a liar. It's funny, but true. Don't make me a liar. Because I have been at this church for almost 12 years now. And I know so many of the families in this church. I know the individuals, and I know the heart behind it. And I know that you're not going to make me a liar, because your heart is the same as mine. You want to see people get connected. You want to see families and know about them. The only way rich community happens in this room is if we do it on purpose. You don't just come in here on accident and it just happens. It's intentional. It's on purpose. And I want to share with you just a few things this morning that Pavilions Campus taught me over the last 2 years, that the families there taught me, because I think that those principles apply here. And if I were to have stayed here and never gone to Pavilions Campus, I would have never learned these things. And they forever have changed my life. And the first principle is this: we have to be careful not to get married to the method, but the message. We have to be careful to not get married to the method in the way in which we do church, but it's okay to stay true to the message. And it's so easy to get caught up into this. When we started the campus, we started with chairs and rows just like this. Well, then like 3 weeks later, we heard that the school was going to be doing construction all summer long. And so then we had to move to a community center. And then it was like, well, how are we going to do it over here? Well, then we're like, well, let's just try it at tables. And there's going to be no worship this morning, really. And it's like, we're going to just do like a Bible study almost at tables. And then we went back to Sierra Oaks. And we're like, are we going to stay in tables? Should we move back to chairs? And I realized throughout this process, we changed formats like 10 times. And everybody at church just rolled with it. Because nobody cared about how we did church. They cared about the end product, which was, I want to really discover who Jesus is. And I want that to impact my life. And I want to be in community with people. I want to know people better on a deeper level. And I want people to know me on a deeper level. And so they didn't care how we did church. And sometimes we get so caught up in church having to be one specific way that we actually lose the heart behind it. And so what I want us to be careful of is that it doesn't matter how we do church. I don't care. I don't care if there are 100 tables in here or everybody has to sit on the floor. I mean, I do, right? We're not going that extreme. But do you get what I'm trying to say? Is that the method is not as important as the message itself. And so if you told me that if we did church in the parking lot for the next year and 100 people would come to know Jesus and you guys would be in deeper, richer community, guess what we would be doing? Church in the parking lot. Like, if the formula was there, then I would go do it. The method doesn't matter as much as the message and the heart behind it. And what I want us to create in this room is a place for people to engage and get plugged into the community. And it has to happen on purpose. The second thing that Pavilions Campus taught me, which was actually a really hard lesson, is that community is worth fighting for because we were designed for it in the first place. I want to read a passage to you. It's just one verse. It's Genesis 1. It's right after God is creating everything. He's creating the waters. He's creating the earth. He's separating light from darkness. Then all of a sudden, he gets to man. And we have it on the 6th day. I think I have it on the screens for you. It's verse 26. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all creatures that move along the ground. You see, in the very beginning, let us. Like, this is where we unpack the Trinity. And for you, the Trinity may not necessarily be vastly important, or you don't understand it, and I would say, like, that's okay. But community is in God's design. In the very beginning, when he's creating, let us make mankind in our image. It's not singular, it's plural. And then you and I are created. And the thing I love about when God creates Adam, he sees that Adam is alone. So what does he do? Like, this isn't going to work. Like, Adam is by himself. And I've given him this task to, like, name all the animals, which that sounds terrible, by the way. But he needs a helper. So what does God do? Creates Eve. You and I, from the very beginning of time, were built for community. Like, it's woven into our DNA. We are built for community, and it's worth fighting for. Do you guys know what this is? Legos, okay. I have another term for this. It's a bear trap, okay? Our girls have been playing with these a lot lately. And Legos by themselves, I think, are the most dangerous weapon in my home. Has anyone ever stepped on a Lego? That's how I'm going to go down. Like, torn ACL, it was a Lego, and it ended Brennan. Like, that's how I imagine it's going down. It's a Lego. By itself, it's absolutely really dangerous. And I step on these all the time, and it's hard for me to not get mad at my girls, like, better clean that up, or I'm throwing it in the trash. Like, that's the statement I make all the time. But you and I are just like this. We are like a Lego. Apart, like, that's not how we were built or designed. We were built to be connected. We were built to be together. We were intrinsically woven to create something that is beautiful and great. We were built to be together, because together we are stronger. We're stronger together, aren't we? And somewhere along the way, we lose sight of that in our community. Somewhere along the way, we lose sight of the idea that community doesn't necessarily matter. But it does. Because just like a Lego, you can create anything that you want. You can build anything that you want. And Legos come in all different shapes and sizes and colors. God created you and I in the very beginning for community, and to build something great together. And it doesn't happen on accident. And the way in which we do this is through stories. Stories are the foundation to community. Which is why when we started Pavilions Campus, almost every single week, there was a testimony that was shared. How many of you guys all now feel 1,000,000 times closer to Doug in this room? Everyone. Because you know his story. You and I need to do better about sharing our stories together. Because your story matters. It's significant. And we've got to create a better way to share stories. And so here's what we're going to do in the next couple weeks. Because some of you have been coming to this church for 40 and 50 years. And you may or may not feel connected. But I can promise you I'm not going back on my word to all the families who I said, this is going to be a great thing because we're going to be better together, and you're not going to get lost. So in the next couple weeks, we're going to be rolling something out that's called a Next Steps class. And if you've been in this church for 40 years and you don't feel connected, I want you to sign up for our Next Steps class. Because at Next Steps, you're going to get to hear a little bit about the heartbeat behind our church. You're going to get to hear about opportunities for you to serve at our church. And you're also going to get an opportunity to sign up to be a part of like a small group or a dinner party at our church. We're going to create an on-ramp for you. If you have been a part of this church for one day or for decades, we want you to be a part of this community, and we want you to be deeply connected. And some of that, yes, is going to happen on a Sunday morning, but some of that is going to have to happen outside on a Sunday morning. So we want you guys to be serving with your hands. It was one of my favorite things at Pavilion's campus, was everybody worked really hard. Everybody was at setup, tear down, kids. Like it was everything all the time, everyone. And that fostered community. So I want you, if you're in this church, to sign up for a Next Steps class when we begin to roll them out in the next couple weeks. I want you to get plugged in. I want you to get connected. I want you to find your group of people that you're going to do life with. And it's going to be messy. Some of you, when I asked you to answer the question, who inspires us, you're like, oh, no, why? I wanted to sit here in my bubble and then leave. Community's messy, you guys. There's no way around it. But I'm asking you to fight for it because it's worth fighting for. And I'm asking you, if you call this your church home, to get connected and get plugged in, to lead someplace. Now we're going to end this morning on communion. The worship team is going to come back up, and I can't think of a better way to end this morning than to take communion together.